Cult Mom Lori Vallow. She's not going away. Now remember, she's charged in the murders of her 2 children, teen girl Tylee and 7-year-old son JJ. But now she's implicated in the murder of her 5th husband, Chad Daybell, the prophet. And if you can only hear me, believe me, I used air quotes for the prophet. She's filed a speedy trial demand. So this case is absolutely going forward. But let me tell you, a lot more than legal maneuverings are happening. And with me is news director at eastidahonews.com, Nate Eaton. Nate, does it never end with these two? I mean, isn't it true that she, not him, wants to have private meetings with Chad Daybell, but he's not as enthused about it as she is?
Well, she wants to talk strategy with him, and Chad has...
I bet she does. Why don't they just get a room and be done with it?
I'm sure that's what they'd want, honestly, but the judge has put a quick nix to this. He says it's not happening. If you need to talk strategy, you can talk between your attorneys. What's interesting, though, Nancy, is that Chad's attorney has been really fighting to get these cases severed. They've been together since they were indicted 2 years ago. And just within the past few days, the judge has agreed.
Okay, Nate, isn't it true that I told you they were going to be severed months ago? As soon as it was stated that the state would seek the death penalty, I told you, Nate Eaton, there would be a severance. Why didn't you just believe me?
You did call it. You did call it, and the judge has granted that.
I can't take credit, Nate Eaton. It's because of a Supreme Court ruling when you have interlocking statements like she gives a statement, he gives a statement, and if they conflict or name each other and they go to trial. So what if that statement is read out loud that Lori Vallow gave and she doesn't take the stand, so Chad Daybell cannot cross-examine her? That's why it's got to be severed, because of the right to cross-examination in the Sixth Amendment. Did that make sense?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing to me is that Lori will not waive her right to a speedy trial. There is so much evidence in this case. They've talked about that at every hearing. 15 terabytes of data, text messages. Her attorney.
Why do you say things like terabytes? Can you just tell me how many file folders we're talking about?
Huge, hundreds of thousands potentially.
Hundreds of thousands. I thought it was 4,000 pages.
Well, that's just one part. That's just one portion. That's just one file. So her attorneys, you would believe, would want more time to go through all of this, but Lori has been insistent. She is leading this case. She is leading their team. She wants to go to trial.
And this is the woman that claims her son turned into a zombie. She's leading the defense team. Oh, I can't wait.
Well, yeah, she's leading it. Chad's going to get a preview of his trial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to get the pre-show, the soft opening, when she goes to trial first. Hey, you need to sit down, Nate Eaton, joining me from eastidahonews.com, or you may need to lay down for this one. Is it true, I wish I could do a drum roll, that Cult Mom Lori Vallow, and I take complete credit for that moniker, has filed notice of an alibi, that she was somewhere else when JJ and Tylee were murdered and buried on her new husband's property in his pet cemetery? She has an alibi. I can't wait to hear it. Please, what's the alibi?
Well, do you remember how she moved to Idaho from Arizona, and then her brother moved in the same apartment complex? They had different apartments near each other. She is saying that on the night JJ Tylee died, they were in his apartment. They were in Alex Cox's apartment, and Lori was in her apartment.
Okay, wait. Let me just let it breathe for a moment, okay? It's like a fine wine. I'm inhaling the alibi right now, and Lori Vallow, I can smell your lies. Okay, let me get this straight. So she's saying, when JJ was murdered, I was in my apartment in 21C, and my son, where the murder occurred, was in Alex Cox, my brother's apartment. That would be 21D. So you're saying she was a few feet away from the murder? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I don't know if those were the apartment numbers, but yeah, that's the idea that they were. The kids were in a different apartment, and then when Tammy died, Chad's wife, she was in Hawaii with friends.
Whoa, aren't you leaving out the end of that sentence? She was in Hawaii with friends getting ready for her wedding to Chad Daybell, who was married to Tammy Daybell, until she keeled over in her sleep. And then he immediately used his ticket, already existing ticket, to Hawaii to meet up with Cult Mom Lori Vallow so they could get married.
Well, don't forget, you said cashed in. That triggered my mind. They're being charged with grand theft for using Tammy's life insurance policy, allegedly $400,000 life insurance policy that they had upped weeks before her death in all of this. So I don't know if they used that money to pay for the wedding, to pay for the transportation, but police are saying they used her life insurance money to buy something to pay for this.
Okay, I'm just letting that sink in too. I forgot about the life insurance policy. Did you say that Chad Daybell, the prophet, I'm getting tired of doing the quotes, but I'll do them again. The prophet, he upped her life insurance?
Yeah. When Tammy was still alive, they went and they upped the policy on her.
You know what? My husband is going to get so jealous of you, and I know you're happily married, because you're making me happier than he has made me in like a week. You know, forget about taking out the trash and taking care of the guinea pigs. Chad Daybell, upped Tammy Daybell's life insurance just before her death.
Correct, yeah.
Why do you sound so flat? You have a very flat affect. I mean, I love this evidence. If I'm prosecuting this case, I am. First thing, I'm walking around the courtroom with a poster. He upped her life insurance policy just before she died in her sleep. That's the big deal, Eaton. Jump on it, man.
Well, I think with this case, Nancy, there is so many interesting details. I could say
that's a
like
nice way to put it. Interesting details. You're saying you just can't get excited about any one because there's so many?
That would be it. I mean, listen, we're going on 3 years now, and the prosecutors have said the evidence in this case is voluminous. That's the word they constantly use. And honestly, if anything that's intriguing is that in 2 weeks we're going to hear all this evidence. It's happening. Lori Vallow will hear all of this evidence as she stands before a jury.
In the last hours, a notice of alibi has been sent by Lori Vallow's defense team, and the alibi is that she was a few doors down from the murder of her child, JJ. Now, what about Tylee? Where was she at the time Tylee was murdered?
We don't know where she was by the time Tylee died, or at the time that Tylee died. Her attorneys haven't delved into that, but I just want to ask you a question, Nancy, as a prosecutor who handled these cases. Is that alibi really going to persuade a jury?
Are you kidding me? I'm in 21C and my son was killed in 21D? No. And yes, I made up the apartment numbers. You clarified that. No. I mean, what mom in her right mind doesn't know where her child is? How long was it from the time that her brother, this is her words, not mine, 2 witnesses there at the time it happened, brother Alex Cox, Cult Mom Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, comes into her apartment. She's been complaining that this little boy, this precious little learning disabled child, 7 years old, has turned into an evil zombie. And we all know in their cult religion, zombies have to be killed to save their immortal soul. So after her complaints that her own son has turned into a, quote, zombie, her brother, Alex Cox, shows up in 21C, gets the son, and leaves. He's got on his PJs, his red PJs, and he's never seen by Cult Mom again. When is he reported missing? How many months later?
2 months.
What?
2 months after September. He was reported missing 2 months later by his grandparents. They hadn't seen him. So they believe he died early September of 2019. November of 2019 is when the investigation really began.
Hold on. I got to do a flow chart here. When was he last seen?
He was last seen, the last time the family was seen was in Yellowstone National Park, September 8th, around that time of 2019.
But that's Tylee.
Correct. You're
When
right.
was
So
the last
Tylee
time
died
JJ was seen?
around September 23rd.
Okay. And then they were reported missing when?
Mid-November of 2019, around Thanksgiving weekend.
And isn't it true, Nate Eaton, that while Tylee's body was nothing but some charred bones and literally a bucket of fat burned? That's what's left of this beautiful teen girl. He, however, was found dead, basically hermetically sealed in trash bags, still wearing the same red pajamas and socks he was wearing the night he was taken out of Cult Mom's home by her brother.
Wrapped in duct tape and buried. Not as deep as Tylee was. I mean, as you said, Tylee was in pieces, and they really had to do a deep search in the dirt for her body, her remains. JJ, they found him fairly quickly, and they were able to cut open into that bag, and sure enough, it was him, both buried on Chad Daybell's property.
In his pet cemetery, where he buried other pets.
Yeah. Correct. As he stood in the driveway, the police showed up that morning. He stood in his driveway, and according to the detectives, continually looked over his shoulder to see what they were doing. And once they hit the spot of the first body, I don't recall which one it was, he got in his car to leave. And the detectives followed him down the street, pulled him over, and arrested him. At the same time, they were finding these children in his yard.
Got in the car to leave. And you know what? Another thing I like to analyze, who called who? Did Lori Vallow? I guess she did, because you can't call into the jail. So she calls from the jail to her prophet husband number 5, Chad Daybell. And just this is during the search. Cops have arrived looking for the bodies. And they're doing that because they followed Brother Alex Cox's pings to Chad Daybell's property. So they're there looking around. When they get out to where the bodies are buried in the pet cemetery, Chad Daybell gets in the car to leave. They arrest him as he's trying to flee the scene. But there was a phone call from Cult Mom to Chad Daybell. What is the content of that phone call? What happened?
So he was sitting in his car in the driveway when he made that call, and what you can do is you can notify an inmate through an electronic system that you want to talk to them, and then they can check a screen in the jail and see that. So I'm not sure who called who, but a call was arranged, and she answered that all chipper in a way. Hi, hon, how are you? And he said the police are at the house searching, and she wanted clarification. Were they in the house? Or were they on the property? And he said something to the effect of in the yard. And he sounds worried. He sounds concerned. She sounds upbeat. Is everything okay? And did I pray for you? The call goes on for a few minutes, and then he ends it, and he's then arrested.
I'd like to hear that prayer. Dear Lord, please don't let the cops find the children's dead bodies. What was the prayer going to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what she would have prayed, but that's the last time they.
I don't like your attitude, young man. What else could she pray for? Did lightning strike the cops dead?
Yeah, I don't know what the prayer involved, but
I don't like it when people drag Christ or our Holy Father into their murder scenarios. So I'm very curious how she was going to weave that into this. A prayer for what? Now, give me the timeline. So Tylee goes missing, last seen September 8. JJ, her 7-year-old little brother, last seen in Lori Vallow's apartment in his PJs, September 23. And when does that pesky wife, Tammy Daybell, keel over in her sleep next to Chad Daybell? When does that happen?
She dies October 19th. But 10 days before, on October 9th, she gets home, gets out of the car, and we know this because she posted on a Facebook community group that night saying someone had shown up and started firing at her. And they were masked, and she thought it was a paintball gun. And she said something, she screamed for help to her husband, and then the gunman took off. Now, Nancy, this is a very remote area. these kind of skits or pranks, if that's what you want to call it, just they don't really happen anywhere. But for this to happen, she said it was so weird to have this person show up, and there's many believe that this was Alex Cox, and that this wasn't.
It was Alex Cox taking a shot at her, the so-called avenging angel. It was him. What was the car? What was the vehicle?
It was her car. Oh, the person walked up. And then ran away.
But so he wasn't in a car.
No, well, he would have had to be in a car to get out there. But we don't know anything about the vehicle, where he parked, whatnot. It was dark. It was fall time, so
I wonder if his phone pings there, because it sure as heck pings the night that JJ goes missing. Well, is taken by Alex Cox, Vallow's brother. His phone goes to his apartment, and from her apartment to his apartment, and from his apartment to Chad Daybell's property, does it not?
Correct. And even the night Tammy dies, his phone pinged at a church nearby, about a mile away. That night she died on October 19th. It could have pinged at the house. If it did, police have not released that information. But we know he was in the neighborhood the night that Tammy Daybell died, in her sleep.
So in the space of about 7 weeks, Tylee is last seen. JJ is last seen, her little brother, and Tammy dies. Let's put it honestly. In the space of 7 weeks, Tylee is murdered, JJ is murdered, and Tammy is found dead. Now, the official autopsy on Tammy Daybell has not been released, but according to your sources, she did not die of natural causes, as the autopsy first said, or was first believed.
Yeah, I remember Chad really insisted that an autopsy not be done, and in the state of Idaho, it's not mandated that an autopsy be done. So she died on a Saturday. She was in the ground Tuesday, and then exhumed 2 months later. And Chad's children have publicly said, and sources have told me, that she died of asphyxiation.
Asphyxiation, of course, means smothering or strangling. Your oxygen is cut off to your brain and you die of lack of oxygen. It can be hanging, it can be being smothered with a pillow, it can be manual or ligature strangulation. All of those are asphyxiation. Positional asphyxiation, like when a baby's in a high chair or a car seat and their head goes down and they can't lift their head up, so that position causes them not to get oxygen. It's called positional asphyxiation. It could be any number of those manners. I'm betting on suffocation. That said, we've got Cult Mom Lori Vallow wanting desperately a meeting in person with Chad Daybell. He's saying ixnay, and the two have been severed. They will not be tried together. That's a lot happening. What can you tell me about the status of an open court? Will there be cameras in the courtroom, a la Alex Murdaugh's double murder trial?
Unfortunately not. And Lori Vallow's, the cameras were in the courtroom until her attorney filed a motion a few months ago not wanting cameras in there. This was the hearing, you might remember, Nancy, where Lori smiled and held up her ring finger and had a band on her finger. And I don't want to say appeared giddy, but she definitely appeared happy. And immediately after her attorneys asked that cameras be booted, the judge granted that request. And, a lot of the victims are really upset about this, the families. Larry and Kay Woodcock, they can't afford, and family members can't afford to go to Boise for 8 weeks and sit every day in a courthouse and get a hotel room to make sure justice is served. So there's no cameras. There's no live audio feed. We will get audio at the end of the day. So we'll get the recording from that previous day, and we'll post that, on East Idaho News. And then we're working to get a sketch artist. But I do know subpoenas are going out right now for witnesses who have been asked to testify during this trial, including family members and friends. And Lori is gearing up for her defense as Chad. We don't have a trial date for Chad yet, but it will likely be this fall or next spring. But
the defense, right? They're going to blame brother Alex Cox.
Oh, well, yeah. One would imagine that would be the defense. And Lori, if she decides to, stand by her husband, which she has done every second, she I don't know if she'll even point the finger at him, even though the bodies were on his property. she might take the fall for him.
Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, she stood by him ever since this started. She has shown no sign of taking any sort of agreement by testifying against him. She has remained consistent to him, and insisting that she be called Lori Daybell and not Lori Vallow, insisting that that the trials be held together. She has not wanted to sever these cases. I was in court with them just 2 weeks ago, and I noticed during the break they were chat. I mean, they were separated from each other, but they were still I don't want to say flirting, but connecting with each other.
Okay, can you be a little more specific?
Well, there was a break where everybody stood up, and normally how it is Chad sits at his table, and then he has an attorney, and then there's Lori's attorneys at another table with her. They're separated, so they're not near each other. But when all of the attorneys stood up when the judge left the room and everybody was sort of mingling, he and her were looking at each other, whispering. I don't know what they were saying, whispering enough so they could hear, and smiling. There was no sign of any sort of bad relationship between the two.
Can I ask you about, and I love this so much, a premonition? Because within 2 weeks of Tammy Daybell's death, Chad Daybell marries Lori Vallow in Hawaii. She had been a widow for 3 months. Wasn't there a long trip that Tammy Daybell took to visit relatives at Chad Daybell's insistence?
From what I understood, Chad told people for weeks, months, Tammy was going to die in a car crash, and it was not happening. This was well into his relationship with Lori Vallow. And so finally, Chad went to his wife, but from what I'm told, and said that he had a vision, that a relative, an ancestor, had visited him and said, Tammy needs to go see her family. And this was a little odd because anytime, when I say go see her family, they live 6 hours away, 6-hour drive. Tammy never did this alone. They went as a family, or they went as a couple, and they would spend time together with their extended family. But Chad insisted she go alone on this particular trip, and really pushed it. And so Tammy even told her family, Chad says, I need to come and see you. So she got in the car. I believe it was a Friday. She drove the 6 hours, got stuck in traffic, got there very late, spent time with the family, and then the next morning said, well, it's been great here, but I got to get home. I got to get to my house. And turned around and drove the 6 hours home. And nothing happened on the trip. And the next weekend is when her family got a call.
So I guess Chad Daybell was just hoping she'd die in a car crash?
Apparently so. The family has told me that she was perfectly healthy that weekend. There was nothing wrong.
I love when clairvoyance enters the picture, as I mentioned to you before, like with Scott Peterson, who told Amber Fry, his mistress, that this would be his first Christmas without his wife Lacey, and poof, it was, after he killed her. Same thing with O.J. Simpson, who had some sort of a dream about Nicole Brown, his wife, dying, and darn, she did. I love it when clairvoyance and visions and dreams, prophetic dreams, come into play. But I guess that wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the prophet Chad Daybell. What are some other of his prophecies?
Well, he believed and told people that when he and Lori were, after their marriage, that there was going to be a huge earthquake in Utah in the West, and that everybody would be so focused on this earthquake and thousands of people dying and the world going into great commotion, that he and Lori could then go on and fulfill their mission, that no one would be concerned about them, that they would not be the focus.
And their mission was
to prepare for the second coming of Christ and choosing the 144,000 who would be the elected people to usher in the return of Christ.
Will you please stop bringing Christ into this? Okay, I don't think he wants anything. Of course, I certainly can't speak for him, but I don't think he wants anything to do with a motive for murder. But that's on you, Nate Eaton. When is the trial going to start, Nate?
April 3rd, jury selection begins, and we should have opening statements the latter part of that week or the following Monday.
I can't wait. Nate Eaton joining me from EastIdahoNews.com. We wait as justice unfolds. Bye, Nate. Bye, everybody.